probably like Birmingham areas, Tuscaloosa areas, even Huntsville areas. There's colleges in just about every service county. So I think that this is going to be a really important informational thing. So I'm going to go ahead and let you start sharing your screen, get started. If you need anything from me, of course, I will, be here. I'm going to turn off my audio and video just so I don't like mess up with yours or anything, but I will be here and I will monitor the chat for you if there's any questions that come through. So don't feel like you have to do that.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Thanks again. Excited.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Faith, and thank you to our CEA for having me here today to host this Lunch and Learn. I am going to share some about my office, which is the Safe Harbor office at Auburn University, and then I'm going to talk just through some best practices that I've learned in this past year with Safe Harbor when it comes to supporting college students who've experienced sexual violence. So I'll start off by just saying that I'm from the Safe Harbor office at Auburn University. We are a victim advocacy office. We support Auburn students and employees who have experienced any form of sexual or relationship violence. And let me go to the next slide. Great. So we have a pretty small team here at Auburn University. It is myself, I'm the Safe Harbor coordinator, so I'm the full-time staff member. And then I have a wonderful graduate assistant. Her name is Asmita. We are within the Auburn Cares office. So we have a lot of support from them, which the Auburn Cares office provides case management services for all Auburn University students. But it's a pretty small team here at Auburn University supporting students in the victim advocacy office. So our services, like I mentioned before, are for any Auburn University student or employee. So that includes faculty and staff members who've experienced sexual or relationship violence. It doesn't matter when the incident occurred or where the incident occurred. We can provide support. Sometimes we work with survivors who experienced sexual violence in their childhood, or we can work with a survivor who experienced sexual violence while studying abroad or not being in Auburn. It doesn't matter where, when it happened, we will provide support. And then the services that our office specifically provides, so all of our services are free, and we are a confidential resource here on campus. So some of the main things we do crisis intervention. We have a 24/7 hotline that people can call. We do safety planning with people. We help people get to safe situations if they're in an unsafe situation. We help people navigate their reporting options. So we'll provide information about reporting to the police or going through the Title IX process, which I'll talk about more in depth a little later in the presentation. And we just provide information and provide support and let the survivor choose what they want to do. They don't have to report to work with our office. We provide medical accompaniment and advocacy. So during the day, we'll go with people if they want to go to a SANE exam, or if they want to go see a medical professional and get STI testing or something like that. We can go with them after hours. We actually work with the rape counselors of East Alabama, and they are the support for students and employees after hours whenever they need medical accompaniment. And then we also provide academic assistance. We work with students, academic colleges to provide academic support if they need it, or if they've had to miss class or anything like that, we can work with their associate dean to provide academic assistance. We provide temporary safe housing. So usually that's up to 2 weeks. We have safe housing here on campus if someone is living in an unsafe situation, or say a sexual assault happened where they lived and they want to live outside of that environment for a while, they can live with us on campus. And then we also just make lots of referrals to campus and community resources, and we really rely on our campus partners and our community partners. So I just thought it'd be interesting to share information about how students get referred to our services. Like I mentioned, we do have a hotline. People can get in touch with us via email at safeharborauburn.edu. Something new that we're trying this year is an online referral form, aub.ie/safe-refer. I think this is nice because students can self-refer or refer friends to our services, and we can even reach out to people via text message, phone call, email, whatever they're comfortable with. And then we also always take walk-ins during office hours, and our office is located in the Student Center on Auburn's campus in Suite 1206. So I thought it would be interesting just to start off by talking about what power-based violence looks like on campus. I'm sure this is mostly a group of professionals who work in victim advocacy offices across the state. Y'all probably know a lot of this information, but I think it's just always a good way to start the conversation. How our office defines power-based violence. So our office supports anyone who's experienced power-based violence, and we kind of say that's the larger umbrella, and sexual violence and relationship violence is underneath that. And we define power-based violence as a form of violence that uses an assertion of power, control, or intimidation with the intent to harm another person. So that includes sexual assault, sexual harassment, stalking, dating and domestic violence, terroristic threats, and drugging, because those are all forms of violence where someone tries to control another person. And often the perpetrators of power-based violence, it's a pattern of behavior. It's not usually a one-time incident. Here is the information that we usually share about what does sexual violence look like on campus. The big statistic is that 1 in 5 women will be assaulted during college. I know Faith was mentioning earlier about something called the red zone. So more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur in either August, September, October, or November. A lot of practitioners refer to that as the red zone because that's a time when students are at an increased risk of sexual assault. I think something else that's really important for students to realize, and advocates who work with students to realize, is that students are at an increased risk to experience sexual violence during their first few months of their first and second semesters of college. So our first year students are at an increased risk of experiencing sexual violence. Only 20% of female students aged 18 to 24 report to law enforcement. And then this is kind of some larger statistics about intimate partner violence. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the US have experienced intimate partner violence. And then nearly half of female victims and 1/3 of male victims were between ages 18 to 24 when they first experienced violence by an intimate partner. And then 13% of all college students, that includes graduate students and undergraduate students, will experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. So really this 18 to 24 age range is just a really high risk time for experiencing sexual violence. And that's why it's important that there are resources for students and that we also really increase our education and prevention efforts for this age group of students, whether they're college students or not. It's just a time that's dangerous. And all those statistics come from RAIN and also the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. And so those resources are great and have even more information for those who are interested in learning more. So I have been in my role with the Safe Harbor office for the past year. And whenever I was asked to do this lunch and learn, I just thought it would be interesting to talk through like some of the key takeaways of things that I've learned that have helped me as an advocate. So one of the first things that I've learned is the importance of emphasizing sexual citizenship when it comes to prevention and education. And I get this idea from this really awesome book. I actually have it here in my office right now. For anyone who lives locally and wants to borrow it, you can come borrow it anytime. But it's a book called Sexual Citizens, and it's Sex, Power, and Assault on Campus. And I really, really enjoyed reading this resource. And they approach sexual assault as a public health issue. And they kind of use this metaphor of if your drinking water is poisonous, you wouldn't go to each individual person, and you could go to each individual person and tell them to stop drinking the water one at a time. But it would be more effective to address the issue and go to the source of where the poison is to make the water healthy and safe for everyone to drink. And they take that same approach of let's go to the source of why college students are experiencing so much sexual violence and try to address that rather than just focusing on individual behaviors of telling people how they can be safe or talking to people about how to not perpetuate sexual violence. So they really address sexual assault as a public health issue, which I liked a lot. And they kind of have these three main points of talking about sexual projects. So understanding why people have sex, whether that's for pleasure or intimacy to get closer to a partner, or maybe for social status. There's a lot of reasons why people are looking to have sex. And it's important for us to understand why other people might be wanting to have sex, to understand why we ourselves want to have sex. So they just talk about understanding all these different sexual projects. And then the part that I really like that they emphasized is sexual citizenship. So just this understanding that we all have sexual rights, and it's also our responsibility to respect the sexual rights of others, and just kind of coming from this empowering mindset of helping people to understand and connect more with their own sexuality can actually prevent sexual violence. And I like that positive, empowering aspect of sexual citizenship. And then something else that's really cool that the book talks about is sexual geographies. So how are spaces set up on campus so that people might be more likely to experience sexual violence. And one of the examples that they use is like when you think of most college dorm rooms, there's like a bed and a desk and the floor. So if you're like bringing someone back to your room to hang out with them, even if you don't know if you want to have sex with that person or not yet, like really the only place for y'all to sit if you don't want to sit on the floor is on the bed. So even adding things like couches to dorm rooms can help prevent sexual violence, which is something interesting that I didn't think of. And something else they mentioned was like the importance of colleges having safe spaces that are open 24/7 for people to hang out. So there is like whenever students are going out, instead of always having to go back to someone's apartment or to bring them back to your room, like it's a good idea for dining halls to be open 24/7. So that students can go to a dining hall after they go out, because that's a safer location that's more neutral. It's neither person's place that they live. It's not private, but it's still a place where they can keep hanging out and getting to know other people. So yeah, I just really love this book of how there's these big systemic issues that lead to sexual violence really being an epidemic on college campuses. So how can we address those issues to prevent sexual violence? And I started, after I read this book, whenever I go present to students, I've added this new slide that I'll share with y'all called Sexual Rights and Responsibilities, because I am trying to incorporate sexual citizenship into more of my outreach presentations. So I always talk to students about how it's your right to choose if and how you express your sexuality, taking the shame away from sex so that people can communicate about it more, letting people know they have the right to control their body. They can choose if they want to be sexually active or not. Either choice is okay. And then also letting them know that they always have the right to change their mind and stop at any time during any sexual activity for any reason. And then I also really emphasize it's your responsibility to respect the rights of others. So only participate in sexual activity with a partner who's freely, knowingly, and enthusiastically consenting, which I know consent is a big thing in the prevention space that we focus on. But I really like this mindset of sexual rights and responsibilities because I think it just empowers people to communicate and use their voice more. So something else that's definitely a best practice that I'm sure any of you who work and victim advocacy already emphasizes trauma-informed care. And then in Safe Harbor, how we define trauma is just an experience where a person feels intense fear, powerlessness, or hopelessness. Something that I've really realized this past year is that perception really differs greatly among individuals. How one person experiences stalking and their feelings about that will really differ from how someone else experiences a similar situation. And just how trauma affects individuals, all aspects of their life, impacts them physically, emotionally, intellectually, impacts their academics, and also spiritually. So again, whenever thinking about trauma-informed care, I think it's just important that we understand the impacts of sexual assault. And I think especially with college students, something that I've thought about a lot in this past year is how a lot of times when someone experiences sexual violence, there is a disruption in their daily activities. There might be increased substance use, anxiety and depression. So it really does impact their academics and their ability to accomplish their academic goals or their personal goals, whatever they came to college to achieve. Whenever they're dealing with the aftermath of sexual violence and that trauma, that can really impact all aspects of their life. And so it's just really important as practitioners that we have an understanding of that, and that we're trying to holistically care for the people that we're working with. So yeah, in Safe Harbor, we just really emphasize this safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, empowerment, and cultural relevance, all those tenets of trauma-informed care. And I think for us, really one of the biggest things we try to emphasize is choice, that we always want to work with people and not for people. So I think whenever anyone comes to our office for support, it's always a really collaborative process where we're here to provide the information, but they're making the decisions. And I think something that's been really cool about Safe Harbor that I've realized in this past year is that so much of the time survivors know what they need to do. They're so resilient. They know the steps that they need to take for themselves. And I really think what Safe Harbor provides more than anything is just like a quiet and supportive and calm space for them to have just the chance to make the decisions they need to make, that will help them best move forward in their healing process. So something else that's really important whenever it comes to supporting survivors of sexual assault on college campuses is having an understanding of Title IX and what it even is, and how to best navigate that process. So Title IX, it's the educational amendment that no person in the US shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So universities that receive federal financial assistance have to make sure that people are not discriminated against on the basis of sex. So that's why Title IX does apply to things like the sports arenas, why we have more women's sports now, but also Title IX applies to students not experiencing any gender-based violence that, like I talked about earlier, might impact their academic or personal goals, the reason that they came to college. So some important things to know about navigating Title IX on any college campus is that every campus needs to have a readily accessible policy. So like at Auburn University, the Title IX policy is on the Title IX website, and that goes through all the things that are against our Title IX guidelines that would be a violation of Title IX at Auburn University. And it also talks through the process of how to file a formal complaint if someone violates the Title IX policy. And every university has to, by federal law, have a readily accessible policy that you can look through so that you can understand your rights as a student at that institution. Also, something that's important to know about Title IX is unless faculty or staff at that institution are confidential, so Safe Harbor is confidential, at Auburn University, student counseling and psychological services are confidential, and the medical clinic's confidential. But anyone else, any Auburn University staff member, faculty member, they are all mandated reporters. So basically what that means is if a student comes to them and tells them, hey, I've experienced a sexual assault, or my boss is sexually harassing me, or my boyfriend's abusive, they have to file a Title IX report because they are a mandated reporter. And essentially what that means is that staff member will usually fill out an online form, or they'll directly contact the Title IX coordinator and let them know what the student told them. And then the Title IX office will provide outreach to that student. At Auburn University, it's usually in the form of an email about resources and then their rights and responsibilities. I know in the outreach email that our Title IX office sends, they talk about Safe Harbor. They also talk about rape counselors of East Alabama. They talk about student counseling, but students don't ever have to engage in the Title IX process if they don't want to. So even if a mandated reporter makes a Title IX report and Title IX reaches out, the student won't get in trouble if they don't respond to that outreach from the Title IX office. And then going off of that, every student has the right to make a formal complaint. Usually now the Title IX guidelines are changing actually in 2023, starting this fall. But what that means as of now is that they will have to write a written complaint or statement. Like if a student is sexually assaulted by another student, they would write a statement and submit that to their university's Title IX coordinator to officially start the process. And the formal complaint process at most universities, it'll probably take a couple months, but essentially what happens is the student files a formal complaint, then they have investigators who will investigate the incident and type up a written report. The investigator will interview the student. They'll also interview the perpetrator. Sometimes they'll interview witnesses, like anyone the student mentions, friends, roommates. Then they'll make an investigative report. And then both parties, the student and the perpetrator, so the victim and the perpetrator, will get to review the report. And then usually it will go to a formal hearing where a hearing officer, and that's usually someone outside of the university, will decide if it was more likely or not that that incident occurred. And then if that student is found responsible for that incident, if the perpetrator is found responsible, they can have different sanctions, such as being suspended, not being able to register for classes with the victim, not being able to attend certain events on campus, not being able to maybe go to the library at certain times. So there's like a variety of sanctions that can come from that formal Title IX process. And someone can do the Title IX process and the criminal justice process at the same time, or they can choose to do the criminal justice process and not the Title IX process, or do just the Title IX process and not the criminal justice process. One really cool resource that's important to know about on all campuses is if you don't want to go through the formal Title IX process, you can request something called a no contact directive. Essentially, that is exactly what it sounds like. And you don't have to provide any evidence to request a no contact directive. So like I could request a no contact directive from any other Auburn University employee or student, and it would be a mutual agreement where we would both not contact each other, not go to sometimes they can specify that they don't go where you live, you don't go where they live, y'all don't stay in certain spaces other than classrooms that you're both in. So that's a really good tool that you don't have to provide any evidence for, but it's just a good resource. Something else Title IX office can do is provide academic accommodations and support. Whenever a student goes through the Title IX process, they always have the right to an advisor. So sometimes students will hire a lawyer to be their advisor through the Title IX process. But if they don't have funds to hire a lawyer, then the university has to appoint an advisor for that student, because both students have to be represented in a hearing. And usually that will be like a faculty or staff volunteer who's been trained in the Title IX process. And then for the formal complaint process, that can be resolved informally, or they can go through that formal hearing process I talked about earlier, or they can more come up with an informal agreement if they don't want it to go to a hearing. So there's lots of options. I know it's confusing. One really awesome resource to know about is knowyour9.org. This is just a really good resource for students to really break down the Title IX process, and also to talk to help people know what their rights are through the Title IX process. And then one of my final takeaways whenever it comes to supporting students who've experienced sexual violence or relationship violence is just the importance of creating a community of care. In Safe Harbor, we really rely on our wonderful campus partners and our wonderful community partners. We work really closely with student counseling. We work really closely with our medical clinic. We work closely with Rape Counselors of East Alabama, with the Domestic Violence Intervention Center, with Unity Wellness. We work closely with our campus safety office and our Title IX office, our accessibility office. We can also help provide accommodations for students who've experienced sexual violence or might be experiencing PTSD. So yeah, and the police department. So it's just really important to communicate well with others and to rely on your partners. Something that's really cool that Auburn's created, that we've been able to advocate for, is having the SANE program at the Auburn University Medical Clinic. So students can go to get a SANE exam at the medical clinic during business hours. After hours, they do have to go to the hospital. I know RCA is also working on having a location where people can go get SANE exams after hours. But this has been just a really great partnership with us in the medical clinic that has made SANE exams, I think, more accessible for students and more comfortable because it's in more of their comfort zone than having to go to the emergency room. So yeah, I know that was quick, but are there any questions? Do y'all have any questions for me? And if you see this later and have questions, you can always reach out to ausafe@auburn.edu or safeharbor@auburn.edu. I'm always happy to talk with other professionals, or if you just want more information, I'm always happy to chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do y'all have it all on and you might have said it, but do y'all have a place on y'all's website that kind of explains the process about the formal and the no contact? Do y'all have like where it's kind of spelled out for, like if someone was just looking and wanted, that information, do y'all have that provided on the internet?
Yes. So I would go to the Auburn University Title IX office website to look into that. They have the process more broken down and they have the full policy there. It is tough because the policy is just really lengthy and sometimes difficult to understand. So that's why it is good to maybe directly go talk with Title IX or talk with Safe Harbor to break it down. But if someone wanted to just look, they can go and look at the Title IX website and it will talk through all of students' options through the Title IX process. And I think, Amanda, that's a good point. That could maybe be something that our office could work on in this next year, is maybe creating more of a user-friendly guide to the Title IX process, and working with Title IX to create that. Because I think right now when you go and look at the policy, it's like a lot of pages. I want to say it's like at least 20 pages or something. And I don't know if the average student is going to read through that, but it is there. But I do think probably, at least at Auburn University, there's ways we can make it more user-friendly to the average reader.
Awesome. Thank you. Because I know that sometimes we have victims that will call us, and one of their big things when they're getting ready to do the Title IX, they're like, well, do I need an attorney? Do I not need an attorney? They said they're going to appoint someone. So just that, clarifying what that means and what that looks like, I think would be so helpful. Not only the victim and survivors, but, I'm learning as I go as well. But it's just something good for me to be able to kind of explain as well.
No, that's such a good point, Amanda. And I agree. And you can always shoot any questions to me, but you're right. I think it could be more user-friendly. And I do think it's important to emphasize students don't need an attorney for the Title IX process. I honestly don't necessarily think that someone who hires an attorney versus someone who has a university appointed advisor has that much of a different outcome. I think it's something people can do if they have the funds, and it will just give them a greater peace of mind to have an attorney that they hire. But I feel like how the process works, unlike the criminal justice system, I think you should still have a fair and just process without having an attorney necessarily representing you.
No, because like we was working with someone, and when they told this individual how much the attorney fees was going to be, it was pretty high. It was thousands of dollars. And so, I think that's something that people need to be aware of, because I don't think people really realize how much it is, versus, and just knowing that there is going to be, representation there for them. I just think it's important. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And I think I'll say one other thing. Students are always welcome to have a designated support person with them. So they have their advisor, they have to have an advisor present. But sometimes Safe Harbor will just go as a support person, or if they wanted someone from RCA to come as their support person, I think that's great. And I do think that sometimes having a support person and just one other witness to the process can help students sometimes. So I feel like whether that's y'all, whether that's us, or even if a student brings like a friend or just some outside person, I encourage students to use a support person, because especially the hearings, they take several hours. It can be just emotionally difficult. I think really my main role whenever I've supported someone, whenever they've been going through the Title IX process, is sometimes even just asking like, hey, can we take a break? Or like, can we go get water? Or can we step away, go to the bathroom, something like that. So I do think tell students to utilize their support person for sure. So they'll have the advisor, but they can also bring a support person, and that's obviously free. So yeah.
What was the name of that book again?
So I'll pull it up. I have it right here. So it's called Sexual Citizens, Sex, Power, and Assault on Campus. And it's really good. It's cool because it's mostly like narratives. So it's people's stories. The beginning can be kind of more dry, like this is how we did our research and this is the methodology we followed. And for that part, I was like, okay, I care, but not really. But
Yeah.
it's a really engaging read. Like it's cool because they really talk about different students and different situations. And yeah, I think it's kind of helps my perspective on things, but it's definitely a worthwhile read for anyone who's kind of in this space for sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Again, I was really interested after you started talking about that. I love, any literature on the topic, and I hadn't heard of that one before, but I really like the concepts that you brought during presentation. It's cool. Thank you. Okay, any more questions? Anything else that y'all have for Carrie? Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, Carrie, again, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. Again, much needed, came at such a perfect time for the upcoming school year. And I do appreciate, I know this is probably a crazy hectic time for you. So I do appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule for this. And joining us and being able to talk about this.
Yes, of course. I'm just so thankful for y'all to have me. Please invite me back. And I'll definitely be attending future Lunch and Learns. This is such an awesome resource that y'all provide. So thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you. We will have you back in.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right. Well, thank you again, Carrie. Thank you for anyone joining us or has joined us. I know we had a couple of people hop off, but we do this every last Tuesday of the month from noon to 1, so your lunchtime hour. So again, thanks for joining us, and we will see everyone hopefully next month